Asian companies, creativity is challenging because we tend to have this fear of failure, right? Losing face. We make mistakes, we try to take a risk and then it doesn't work out. And sometimes our culture doesn't really appreciate that. If you ask a room of 10 people a question, 9 out of 10 people will give you the same obvious answer because they don't take the time to maybe consider a little bit more, to step back and think, to maybe think of it from a different angle, and they will always give the obvious answer. This is Asia. You know, we have this copy mentality. We see something good, oh, copy. That's why, we're great at copying, right? But we're not so good at taking the time to really process, try to manufacture a more elegant solution. We're good executors. Given a task, we're like a dog biting a bone, right? We won't let go. We'll drive for KPIs. We will meet the timelines. But sometimes we don't know whether we're doing the right things or whether things are strong enough or robust enough to be more competitive in the marketplace.
Today, my guest is Kenneth Chan. Kenneth was the former CEO of McDonald's China and the former managing director of McDonald's Singapore. In today's episode, you will hear about how he became the CEO of McDonald's China, the lessons he learned along the way, and insights from leading a team of 150,000 people in China. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. I am also doing a signed book giveaway by Kenneth. The book is titled Asians in Charge. All you need to do to qualify is to sign up for my newsletter at ykeith.com. Why consider a career in McDonald's?
Every time, when I used to be working there and I don't work there anymore, I would tell people that when they ask me what do I do for a living, I say, I flip hamburgers for a living, right? But little do people know that, to get that one hamburger out to one customer, actually in the background, right? You need to have sort of the best, people systems, training systems, real estate, marketing, leadership marketing, supply chain excellence and all those things just to get one hamburger out to one customer. So as a business, it's actually very interesting and very multifaceted, right? So that's one aspect of it, which I like. It's also, I started as marketing. So at that point, it was interesting for me because McDonald's is one of those brands where you can actually sort of shape the conversation sometimes in a small market like Singapore. So it is quite a high profile a brand, for example, and you can influence things, with Hello Kitties, Nasi Lemak Burger and those things, right? So that's quite fun to be able to do that. But I think the more important thing, if you ask most McDonald's people why they stay for such a long time or why they join and then keep on staying there, it's because we interact with a lot of people. And, it's such a people company, we employ thousands of people, and a lot of people either stay with us or some of the students might come in for a stint on holidays and then they move on to other things, but they remember their time at McDonald's, right? I think why people stay mainly is because of the affiliation that we have with each other. It's very much a company that, people care for each other, because in the service industry or retail industry, it's already very difficult. You're facing customers, you're on your feet, 9 hours a day, for example. It takes sort of this teamwork and camaraderie, working together, shared war experiences, and then people grow with each other. You see people's development, and I think people get affiliated with that. Yeah.
If I could, I would like to go back to the early part of your career. When you look back at Singapore in the maybe early 80s or early 90s, a lot of them would consider high finance as the career path to look towards. Most people would maybe, I won't say look down, but most people would consider maybe FMCG or even fast food as something that is secondary or not even a viable option.
Well, you're absolutely right. When I was growing up also, and when I went to school, I actually went in as pre-med thinking that, all of us have to be either engineers, doctors, or maybe be in the financial industry, right? So I started as pre-med and I hated it. That just wasn't my cup of tea, right? What I ended up really enjoying was the humanities, social sciences, psychology, sociology, those sorts of things. So the more humanistic social side of it. But to be practical, I ended up with a major in economics, right? And never really had a chance to use it. So when I sort of came out to get into the workforce after the army, like most young people, you're kind of wondering what you wanted to do. I followed my father's footsteps. I went into the airlines first, right? And then I was sort of a cadet admin officer where we were executives who were training to take on different roles there. But in the first year, we really spent our time being exposed to all aspects of the business. So check-in counter, baggage handling, catering, so on and so forth, right? And I found I didn't really find my calling there because it was such a big organization. I felt that I was a bit of a small fingernail within a big body, right? So I couldn't find my voice there. It just so happened that I went into an interview with Procter & Gamble, and at the time they were looking for people to join them on the regional role here for brand marketing, right? And Procter & Gamble is known for brand management, basically. I had no idea what marketing was at that time. This was the late 70s, right? But I just went in there, and I happened to be one of two folks who got into that cohort of employees who joined, and suddenly I found this incredible sort of role called marketing, and it was all about learning about how to build brands, how to think about the financial aspects of a brand, how to make sure that we think about customers and what they want, how we go to market, how we work with our sales teams to ship in and merchandise and work with the trade to do all these things. So I thought it was a fascinating world. And, so when you say I joined McDonald's, I actually joined marketing. I was actually a marketing person first and foremost, right? And just so happened that after my stint in Procter & Gamble, I was asked to go into McDonald's as an assistant marketing manager at the time. And I thought that would be interesting because, as I said, McDonald's has a lot of resources as far as advertising dollars. But it also did other things like a lot of communications activities and, social activities, etc., which I thought would expand my, knowledge and universe there.
And I suppose at that time, marketing as an industry in Singapore or in Southeast Asia is relatively nascent still. So you probably had a lot of technological transfer of know-hows from the West to the East, like in Singapore. So I wanted to ask you, like in those early years in McDonald's, what do you learn about brand that was particularly impressive, that kind of shaped your thinking?
I think all of us, consider ourselves as brand stewards. We are the guardians of the brand. Sometimes we are temporary guardians of the brand because we may leave jobs, etc., right? So the question is, how do you sort of shape the brand at a time when you are looking after it and in your marketplace? And there is always this bit of tension again, because as a US brand principal, they see McDonald's one way. And when you bring it to a market like Singapore or China or some other nuanced place, does that brand in its US form really fit into these markets wholesale? And this tension continues, till now. And the real answer is that yes, there are some core principles of the brand or core levers of the brand that are important. For example, the brand is, in its truest form, is really good at, quality, service, and cleanliness. Just the fundamentals of going to market and providing good service, right? The brand, in its fundamental form, is all about convenience. So we're open 24 hours. You can find us accessible everywhere. We have drive-thrus, we have delivery, we have breakfast, etc. And the brand primarily is for families, right? Because if you really ask yourself, as like a place like Singapore, which brands would you consider a brand for kids? Or when we ask your kids which brands do they know, McDonald's will be up there, right? So if you can sort of, shape at least the fundamentals of the brand and make it embedded within the local culture here, and then build on local nuances on top of that, that's very important as well. So the one thing I learned, obviously, is that, we are guardians of the brand, no matter which country we're in, and we got to do our jobs first to make sure that the fundamentals of the brand are in place, right? I work with young marketing people who've joined the brand, and sometimes they say, people here, they like local food, and, we need to change our food into some of these other variations or other versions of McDonald's. And I say, yeah, maybe there's a time and space for some of these limited time offers, nasi lemak burger, those sorts of things. But core to the business is we sell Big Macs, we sell French fries, we sell chicken McNuggets, and 80% of our sales actually flows through these core products as well. So you have to believe, and you have to continue to promote these core products. And if you feel that you cannot, maybe this is not the right brand for you, you cannot be the guardian of this brand. So, I think in marketing and in brand management, the question is, how do we make sure that we shape the brand so that its core gets represented well, and then find the local nuances or the variations that might energize and excite consumers every once in a while.
I just came back from Japan.
Yep.
I spent some time in Kyoto and Tokyo as well. what I've noticed about the McDonald's there is that they actually do serve the core staples that we have in Singapore and the US. You have your Big Mac, your McChicken, and also your chicken nuggets. And I've actually tried it. But what I'm really surprised by is how consistent it is. That it's something that you have across the board, no matter which market you're in. And another thing I'd like to add is that the toilets are really clean across all the McDonald's. No matter where you go, you can go to Switzerland, China, Singapore, you can use the toilets. They can always trust on using it.
That's always been the aspiration. So they try their best, and we've always tried our best to maintain that. Yeah.
And then you became the managing director of McDonald's Singapore. Can you take me through the journey of how you went from maybe working in the marketing department, and then now you have to scale up in terms of your capabilities to become the managing director?
Yeah, when I was in marketing manager in McDonald's, my boss at the time, the gentleman who actually started McDonald's in Singapore, came to me and said, we sort of need a little bit more local talent in our leadership pipeline. So we would like you to sort of, get on a little bit of a fast track to get into senior leadership roles. But if you really want to be in senior leadership in McDonald's in particular, you need to go and learn about the restaurants, run the restaurants, see what they do, meet the customers, and do everything that the restaurant people do, and be part of operations, basically, right? And I said no, I didn't want to. I love marketing. I'm going to be a marketer for the rest of my life. But as with all my journey, my career journey, I had good nudges, and he nudged me along and said it'll be good for you. I went into operations, started as a crew, volunteered because I thought from my army days, leading from the front is very important. So anytime anybody asks who wants to clean toilets, I said, I'll do it. Or, wash the floors, I'll do it first. And then, obviously I learned about the business, how to run operations. I learned more importantly how to work with people because, in maybe department functions, you're very much siloed. But when you start going to the field, the most important thing is how do you sort of, work with people, bring people along and get results through people. And that was probably my most valuable learning as I went into the field. I was also given the opportunity to move up the ranks. So I started as a crew. I did my roles as, the managers in the restaurant and then the store manager. And then I did, various operational roles, became director of operations, had the opportunity to cross-functionally move into different things like HR, supply chain, etc. And then in 2003, I became the managing director of Singapore.
And that's what you kind of allude to in your book, which is that you to earn your place at the table, in the sense that if you want to aspire towards leadership, you really have to understand every facet of business operations that you're working in.
I think cross-functional exposure is still there. That's always been at the beginning. People have encouraged people to try to learn more about business by, moving to different functions so that you get a better foundation of the business, such that when you move on to higher roles, you really have more credibility and understanding. So that's the ideal set, having cross-functional exposure. I think, beyond that, and maybe this is beyond my roles, but beyond that, what people are trying to get pushed into more is regional exposure. So where the opportunity arises for you to go abroad, that's an important opportunity for you to take. That's a very difficult move for a lot of Singaporeans because everybody's very comfortable here. And if you ask all your regional HR leadership teams, they find that Singaporeans are the toughest to try to relocate. From people from Philippines, India, our neighbors, countries, all hungry for it, they will take the job. But Singaporeans are very difficult. So one of the encouragements would be, we do need more people to take regional exposure.
Yeah.
And then I would say that one of the biggest changes right now would be from how do you sort of solidify your grounding would be, whenever there's an opportunity for you to sort of take on some crucible experiences. Crucible experiences means, experiences which, for example, if your boss told you one day, hey, Keith, we've this project, we are having trouble to try to bring it up to speed, or we need somebody to turn it around. Would you, be willing to take on that role or the responsibility? Or Kenneth, we've got this market that's struggling a little bit, and we want you to go in there and sort of shape it up and lead the market and bring people out of this issue. Can you do that? Yeah. Those crucible experiences right now are critically important because it teaches you how to be a resilient leader. It teaches you how to work with people during periods of doubt and crisis. How do you bring them along, right? It teaches you how to not only just win the present, but how you also need to build a future so that when you get out of the crisis, you're stronger and more resilient as well, right? And I think in today's world where, it's so volatile and there's so many, maybe there's some black swans around the corner or crisis that happens, it's important for us to sort of work these muscles, cross-functional depth and breadth, regional, getting, different contexts and exposure, and then these sort of crisis, crucible moments to sort of, really solidify your leadership, I think. I think these things are very important.
What I'm hearing from you is that it's not just enough nowadays to be doing cross-functional within your market, but if you're a Singaporean who has aspirations, you really have to start looking out, going to the region, putting yourself out there in the different markets.
Yeah, I think so. I think, one of the thoughts about Asian leadership is that, or Singaporean leaders as well, right, is that we are very capable. I mean, we've got the know-how, we're well educated, we speak multiple languages, we're systematic, we're strategic sometimes. But if you are a great performer in a small market like Singapore, and I'm not dissing Singapore, because Singapore is always known to be a market that's innovative, it's very stable. A lot of global HQs come here, for example. But if you're in a market where, especially in a business context where it's a small market, which is not, where the results are not material to the global organization, versus being in a market like in the US or China or, Europe, where the results really are material to the success of organization, it's hard for you to sort of, showcase your full potential. So my push always for the younger folks is that if you get a chance to showcase your talent, which is very strong in a small market here, but if you can prove that you can get results in a big market, it does present for you a launch pad for you to take on even better and stronger global roles, because then you'll have credibility, that you've proven track record in a market that matters.
You were tapped to go to China and lead, but you didn't say yes immediately. I think most people, when you're given an opportunity like that, such a big opportunity, I think most people would say yes, even though they might say, it's inconvenient or whatever.
Sure.
At the end of the day, it's a big market. It's the one that moves the needle. Why do you think you didn't say yes immediately?
I've never been the most ambitious person. I've always, sort of been a reluctant leader. If you look at your Myers-Briggs score, I am an INFJ. And out of the 20 questions on I, introverted, I'm 20 out of 20 I.
Wow.
So I'm from that starting point, right? And I know a lot of people who have similar profiles like I do, right? And so, one of my, work right now is to sort of, share my experiences with people who, maybe feel the same way, feel a bit of imposter syndrome, to share that, we can work our way out of this and we can raise our hands earlier and we can take advantage of the opportunities, especially nowadays, the opportunities are far and few, right? And, we have to have more confidence in ourselves that we have the capability, to be able to run some of these markets. I mean, you are asked to run the market, so somebody must see something in you, right? The question is, do you see that in yourself? And how do you sort of draw those, that strength within you to be able to, take on that role, right? And I found that, and to share my experience with other people, I found that once I've taken that role, I found that it's, okay, after you settle down and you get rid of all your, insecurities, it's actually a role that you can do and you can do very well. And then you move on to the next role and you realize that you can do that role very well as well. So it's all about, taking that first step and practicing and I think that is the only way for you to sort of reach your full potential. And so my job right now is to encourage, nudge, sometimes coerce people to take on roles, bigger roles as well. And to remove the barriers that stop them from doing that.
So what were the barriers for you during that when they asked you to, hey, go up to China?
One of the simple barriers was, I'd never been to China before that time, right? My Chinese wasn't so good. I went to high school in the US when I was 14. So I had primary school Chinese, but it wasn't, wasn't sharp. Being a Westerner going to China and not knowing Chinese is okay. But being a Chinese, not knowing fluent Chinese, sometimes people look at you a bit funny, right? So that's those sorts of insecurities. Coming from a small market here, trying to think about how do I sort of lead in a much bigger market like China, right? I felt, really, was I the right person to do it? And I think again, it's sort of now I'm trying to bring to light that, we do have as much capability as anybody else maybe in the West who raise their hands to come and do it as well. Because the honest truth is that they didn't do a great job when they were there either, right? So, we have as much capability to do it, and it's a matter of how to, draw that strength for you to get up and, take the opportunity when it arises. Like most Singaporeans, right? I was doing really well in Singapore. I had some regional roles as well. I was looking after Malaysia, Taiwan, Korea, right? Sometimes I think we're so entrenched in our lives here that we sometimes lose this hunger to sort of explore and move out. I remember back in the 80s when I was in maybe Procter & Gamble, I remember our ex-Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, I remember distinctly saying to all the young folks there, go forth, young men and women, to the region, because we want you to get exposed to our neighbors so that we can, expand our reach, but also learn about, our neighbors and sort of, expand the influence of Singapore, as for example, right? So, I'd kind of forgotten that after a while. I did do regional jobs before, but I kind of forgotten that. And I think, this idea that, we can go even beyond Southeast Asia and get to someplace like China, which was a material market for the business. It was the fastest growing market for the company. We didn't have the most robust strategy, and we had to fix it, right? I realized over time that was something that, I probably could do. But I think the thing that brought me over was really the company had spent a lot of time developing me, exposure. I happened to be in a global leadership development program during that period. I seen my peers around the world taking on big roles in UK and France, etc. I thought then at that time that, maybe it was time for me to step up. I know all my Asian peers were encouraging me to do so because they really wanted to, have an Asian face as well, being part of the senior leadership team. And, I think that really, sort of nudged me on to take on that role. And I'm glad I did. I
wanted to ask you about the start state when you entered the market. You alluded to it as to the not so robust strategy in expanding to China. Could you tell me what was the challenge that you saw when you were going into the market? And then what was your approach towards solving those problems that you saw?
Yeah. Well, at the time, it was about 2008, and was the financial crisis, right? And I think McDonald's had been very judicious about how we entered the market. So we were actually relatively slow versus our rest of competitors. So for example, KFC at the time was a benchmark. They were growing aggressively. Starbucks was doing very well as well. And we were growing, but we were, not growing at the pace that, that possibly could have captured the opportunity. And, at the time, every multinational company had a China lens in their growth strategy, in their growth story, right? Because it was really, urbanization was happening, the middle class was growing, wealth was growing, and all the brands were just, looking at that as a new frontier, right? But we didn't really have our act together. So when I first went in there, the first thing I saw was that, we really had more of a scattered approach. We were pretty much everywhere in China because opportunities everywhere in China. We had 26 different offices all over China, right? But when you really, strip the whole business down, 80% of our money was made actually in 4 provinces or key cities. It was basically in, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Beijing, and Shanghai, right? Honestly, if our competitors were to take us down in these 4 cities, we pretty much, be stalled already. But of course, they had their own drive to grow as fast as they could as well. So what we did was we said that let's sort of, reset our strategy. Yes, we want to go fast, but I think we can go faster. We sort of thought about it a little bit more, and then, put all the levers in place so that we can go even faster. So we reset our strategy by not having a scattered gun approach, by having more of an ink blot approach. So we said that, let's identify the, top 11 key cities where urbanization was happening, where the middle class wealth was, and let's populate that even more versus trying to put one store in one market and being very inefficient about that, right? And that led to, efficiency. For example, in Shanghai, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, and we had 80 stores. But once we build up to 300 stores and spend the same money, there's a lot of efficiency there. And you can see that same efficiency happening with supply chain, logistics, transportation, all those sorts of things, right? So we did that. And very quickly, we got ourselves organized. We got the right resourcing. We had to prioritize in terms of getting, our headcount for real estate and development people and stopping headcount for the rest of the folks. You just have to prioritize your resources and needs. And then we got that on track. Then we went into key cities and went to more cities. So we then to the tier 3 and tier 4. And then even then, not fast enough. And then we started a strategy for franchising where all the, big provinces, that are a bit far to reach, like Heilongjiang or Yunnan province, we would get our key partners there to use their capital to grow the restaurant and let them run it, for example. And we give them a license there, right? So putting that together with, and we came up with this, sort of mantra called bigger, better, faster. Bigger was all about, restaurant expansion and also the type of restaurants, not just malls. And we're scared of malls, over dependence on malls. You can see what's happening with malls in China right now. But we said that we need more strategic, like drive-thrus, which are more longer term, for example, right? Delivery, other sorts of delivery mechanisms, right? So bigger was about that, expanding, and that was the first priority. Better was about what is the brand that we should present to China, right? Should we present all these, different limited time offers, or should we just say, hey, by the way, my first McDonald's in China, come and try. This is the service we have. These are the safe restaurants that we have. We're operating 24 hours. We have these things called Big Macs, chicken McNuggets, French fries. Come and try it. Well, great for kids. Come for your parties, etc. So how do you build that brand, right? And then the last part about getting faster is how do you sort of find the enablers of the business? So training of our people, supply chain and logistics, IT and technology to be able to, so that as you grow, it doesn't become a house of cards, but a strong fundamental infrastructure in place for it to expand. And so with all that in place, in short, it took us 18 years to grow 1,000 restaurants. It took us the next 5 years when we were there to grow 1,000 restaurants. And my successor team now is growing 1,000 restaurants a year, right? With some of these fundamentals in place.
The roadmap that you sketched out is it sounds easy to talk about, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, but in actual implementation, it must be really difficult. And you went from a small market like Singapore, which is about 5 million people, and you probably handle a few thousand people here, to leading a team of maybe up to 150,000 people in a market of 1 billion. So there is a huge gap that you have to jump across in order to make those commercial outcomes viable. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the leadership principles or the way you approach leadership as not only executive in this big market, but also as a third culture exec where you're a Singaporean coming in. What were the things that you kind of looked out for in your own leadership journey?
Yeah. Let me start with the third culture part about Singaporean going to China, right? Yeah. One of my big concerns was why would this big country with 1.3 billion people, smart people too, how would they accept this young Singaporean from a small little red dot telling them what to do and how to run the business, right? What credibility did I have for that? And I think number one, so back to what we discussed about getting exposure and experiences. My credibility and results were built in the Singapore market, plus also working with some regional markets, and that was well known. So they sort of knew who I was as well. But I think the most important thing is, as you get there, how do you build trust, right? The first thing that anybody does when you get into a market is they want to know basically two things. What's the plan? And, what about us? What's going to happen to us, right? And, that's why I always say that, first thing for my job is clearly we need to go in there and listen clearly. But, I need to very quickly come out with a plan that is not just a plan on paper, but it has to be an aspiring plan, a plan that people can look up to. It's visionary, right? It's a plan that resonates with people and say, I got it. And that's the path forward. How do I develop that plan? So as you say, that required quite a bit of work, and we got some help, external help to help us frame that up. And then we obviously had to spend a lot of time, testing with people, whether this makes sense or doesn't make sense. And we also deal with the stakeholders, right? I think one of the most interesting things coming from a small market like Singapore, where you're pretty much left on your own, is that when you work in a market that's material to the business, you suddenly have a lot of stakeholders that you have to sort of work through with your global CEO, etc., because you're asking for hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in the market now, right? The board of directors and those sorts of things. So the one quick win was to come out with a plan that we could focus everybody towards stakeholders, our partners, our supply chain, our business partners, our employees, the customers, that a plan to win really, right? And it had to be an inspiring plan. So we did, number one, had to work towards getting that in place very quickly, right? And then the second thing was to sort of, once the plan was in place, is how do we then organize the teams to execute the plan? Because, execution is, clearly just as important as the strategic intent of where we're headed, right? And so very quickly again, we reorganize ourselves against, the biggest pillars of what we need to do. So how do we sort of, expand our portfolio of restaurants? How do we develop the skill set for the markets to do it quickly and for them not to make too many mistakes while they're doing that? Because you can open lousy restaurants by trying to chase a number. So putting all that in place, getting people the right resources to be able, tools to get them to do those things as well. I think, and then the last piece about, how do you sort of inject yourself within a market like that? How do you win the trust of people? I think what I've realized is that, apart from getting winning strategy, apart from being very clear how the organization is going to be formed, I think the last part would be, if you can impart knowledge and develop people along the way, either directly or through what you're doing, you're teaching people how to run the business, for example, and people are learning from you and getting something out of you and, improving themselves, I think everybody will look up and respect you, or listen, or at least listen to what you have to say, right? And make a judgment from there versus rejecting you straight away from the start, right? So I think the mindset always has to be business first, get it in place, organization, sort it out quickly because everybody's waiting for that. And the last part is making sure you win the trust of your folks. And, one of the quickest way to win the trust is to add value to them, make sure they're learning something, seeing things that they haven't seen before, make them impress with the vision that you have, capture their imagination. These are sorts of things that, an inspiring, leadership approach has to have.
You talked about the fact that you were not just working in Singapore, you covered the other markets in East Asia as well. And you're now an Asian exec in a primarily Western management or leadership team. Can you talk a little bit about how you navigated that cultural dynamic?
This is actually a crux of Asian leaders within, say, global multinational companies, right? How do you sort of be that bridge of trust between your headquarters that's based in, New York, Chicago, or London or whatever, and how do you sort of bridge that, trust to navigate and operate within, like, for example, Asia or China, which are much more nuanced markets, very different from, the markets in more developed countries, for example, right? And so, first and foremost, one of the most important things in terms of building trust is for you to have credibility with your stakeholders abroad, right? The bosses, basically, right? And the only way to build credibility would be, number one, to get the results. That's the first thing. Without results, you have no credibility no matter how good your leadership is, right? The second thing is to be very transparent, right? Because, they will wonder in the US, what the heck is this mala thing you're doing in China? What is mala, right? And we only sell nuggets, we only have tomato ketchup, etc. So you have to be the brand guardian and navigate the needs of what we need to present a global brand and how that needs to be represented. But you must also be able to strike a balance of how you can be more locally relevant to the market as well. And that sort of balance is where, leaders from places like Singapore in particular, can be very effective. One of the things I coach people, for example, in China or in Asia, is I tell people who are going to take on leadership roles, don't ever say to your, headquarters that you don't know Singapore, we're very different. or you don't know, China, we're very different. Things are very different here. They hate to hear that, and that's not an attitude that a brand guardian should have as well. What you should be doing is say that, yes, we're gonna be able to promote the brand, right, in its core form, and yes, because we know the local marketplace well, we know the stakeholders and customers well. There are ways for us to capture even more opportunity by finding what's relevant to the local market, right, and that balance, right? It's not one or the other; it's that balance, right? So people in Singapore who are more exposed, more globalized, I think are able to tread that line very well, and to bring the stakeholders on of the sometimes funny things that you're doing, but also to lead the people in the market to tell them why we need to do some of these global things as well. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing again is just that I think people in local markets who understand the marketplace better, they understand, they work with stakeholders, they know the key issues happening in the market. They are able to not just get if you parachute an expat into a marketplace, I think a good expat could get good performance, right? Good generic performance, but a local leader who understands the nuances of the market can get optimal performance. So I think that's the difference. So whether you get a 5% growth, whether you get 10% growth, I think, our value would be, and we have to show that value, is that we can get that 2x growth, versus somebody who may not have a better understanding of the market.
When you were leading China, what were some of the maybe key initiatives that you felt accurately helped, I guess, to a certain extent, size McDonald's to the local market, especially in those kind of key markets that you talked about?
Yeah, I think one of the things was real estate. Real estate is really a foundational piece of a McDonald's brand, right? Where do you site the stores? And if you look at the Western markets, the bulk of the business goes to drive-thrus, because car population has been around for a long time, and drive-thrus generally we can secure the plot of land, and we can secure that for long term, and drive-thrus tend to grow very well over time, right? But then you come to Asia, and then you find that in the key urban centers of Asia, you're really looking at shop fronts and supermarkets, for example, or malls, for example, right? So the question is, do you abandon all of that and just say we want to go drive-thrus in the third outer ring, or the second outer ring, or the fourth outer ring, for example? And so one of the discussions we've always been having is we need to be where customers are, right? So strategically, yes, we're going to build drive-thrus in the outer rings, right? And when suburbanization happens, which it always does as prices in urban areas get more expensive, people move out, and we're ready and poised to capture the market there. But, we have to be where the consumers are. And so we need to find the right, models to be in shop fronts, in malls, etc., while being careful about that, right? And one of the ways for us to make sure that we also, expand our convenience within urban centers is delivery. And delivery was a bigger idea in Asia before it was globally, before even, all the third-party operators came on board, right? And we started delivery in Singapore, for example, before anybody else in the Western market did, right? We started 24 hours, and delivery became Asia's biggest growth driver, for a long time, right? And now it's become the biggest growth lever globally as well for the brand, right? So these sort of nuances, right? The question is, the nuances are there, but how do you sort of bring your stakeholders along without just saying you don't know anything about, and be very defensive about that? You need to bring them along, do a bit of testing, let them understand, and sort of bring that to life.
You led 150,000 workforce in China. It's very difficult to conceptualize that scale, and you have to be able to think from 10,000 feet, but at the same time be able to empathize with the workers on the ground. There's a tension there, right? And you add on to the layer of complexity that you're deploying in multiple cities. Could you share a little bit more about how you approach team building and talent management? Yeah, especially in China's context.
Yeah, I mean it's critical there, right? I would say that one of the principles that I try to use, no matter whether in a big market like China or a small market, is shared leadership. So I want to be sure that, as the CEO, as the MD, clearly it's my responsibility to make sure that the business, organization, brand moves forward. Clearly that's my role. I need to be a driver of that. I need to set the standards and excellence, right? But, if I find the right people who are in my leadership team, and I find the right people who are in the regional roles to run their business, right? And if we can align properly, right, then everybody can be empowered to manage their businesses and, take on the challenges themselves. So the goal is always how do I find the right people and develop them so that they all can become self-starters, self-sufficient, right, and strive for their own results, right? And so, it clearly starts with what we talked about earlier, having a clear and robust strategy, because that is the starting point for everything, right? Once that's clear and it's cascaded, everybody knows, their piece of the puzzle and, what they need to do in order to, get success, right? So, that's a sort of leadership, that if you look at a lot of Asian businesses or the Tauke businesses, right? You have this triangle where the boss is on top, right? And your employees at the bottom, right? And the boss is always barking, orders, right? And it's in the employee's interest to say, I'll follow the boss. There's no interest. There's no real incentive for me to sort of stick my neck out and, try anything different. If I follow the boss, I'll be loyal and I get my compensation. But what we're all trying to do is to invert that triangle this way so that, your employees on top, your customers are on top, and, the leaders at the bottom. And our role is only to provide direction, resources, motivation, so that, and development, so that everybody down the line knows what to do, can do their job, can also strive for doing more, because the more they do, they know that they're incentivized and they'll be able to, exceed and meet targets, which will lead to better compensation, better bonuses, and those sorts of things, right? So that sort of structure is what we try to do.
So the leader is no longer just at the top of the pyramid, but what you're saying is subverting the pyramid. The leader is the enabler now. So it's no longer the choke point.
The leader's enabler. Of course, the leader is always going to be at the top of strategy and direction and standards excellence. But the execution, is always, we should leave the execution closest to where your customers are at the field level, and let them be self-starters and let them, do their own jobs. Yeah.
And we think about McDonald's today, most people don't actually think of it as a innovative company, maybe to their detriment. But actually, if I looked at McDonald's as a business or as a consumer, you will find that it's a very creative company, in the sense that just even in Singapore, you look at the way McDonald's has essentially implemented app-based purchasing decisions into their business. And I think it's one of the best apps out there in the market today with regards to food services. You also think about the kind of creative choices you can come out with, limited time offers, like you shared, seaweed shaker fries, you have the Japanese samurai burger, etc., etc. But in most big organizations, it's hard to encourage creativity. How do you actually incentivize people to be more creative, to take even like creative risks, or to try to implement innovation in the way they approach their product design?
Yeah, I mean, in Asian companies, creativity is, particularly in Asian companies, creativity is challenging because, we tend to have this fear of failure, right? Losing face. We make mistakes. We try to take a risk and then it doesn't work out and we sort of lose face. And sometimes our culture doesn't really, appreciate that, right? So one of the things, again, as we've talked about, was as a leader, one of the modeling that I try to do, and I communicate this to all my folks, is that, how do we break out of mediocrity when we see it, right? Mediocrity is a killer of a business. So the more important posture to take is, how do we find solutions that are, and creativity doesn't mean advertising, what it just means, how do we find solutions that are more competitive, that are differentiated, right? That are more elegant, and then they're not obvious. If you ask a room of 10 people a question, I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people will give you the same obvious answer, because they don't take the time to maybe consider a little bit more, to step back and think, to maybe think of it from a different angle, and they will always give the obvious answer. This is Asia. we have this copy mentality. We see something good, oh, copy. That's why, we're great at copying, right? But we're not so good at taking the time to really process, think, and, try to manufacture a more elegant solution, right? And that's why, we're good executors. Given a task, we're like a dog biting a bone, right? We won't let go. We'll drive for KPIs. We will meet the timelines, but sometimes we don't know whether we're doing the right things or whether things are strong enough or robust enough to be more competitive in the marketplace. So we're doing a lot of busy work. So the question is, how do we sort of move up this value chain to become more creative, have more IP, for example? I always give the example of Foxconn versus Apple. Not dissing, both are great companies. Foxconn is sort of like, they're more than that. They're biggest employer in the world. They do the OEMs for Apple products, etc. They are maybe now maybe 100 billion NT market cap company. Apple, on the other hand, is up that value chain. They're all about ideas. They hold all the IPs, and they are $3.3 trillion US dollar market cap company, right? So the question is not which is better. The question is, can we as Asians sort of move up that value chain a little bit and, be a bit more creative in our approach, step back and think about bolder visions a little bit, right? But this is sometimes very difficult for us. You've seen it. We've seen it in the marketplace. We've seen it in our workplaces as Asians. We say, these guys, all they do is talk the big talk, so chim, sometimes, but, we are the ones getting down to the work and we're getting things done and we're proud of getting things done. And all well and good. Execution is a strength for Asians and we should cherish and keep that. But if we can sort of marry execution with stronger strategic approach and more creative approach, imagine what a brand that we would have. We would have a fantastic brand. We can think of the bold ideas and we can get it done. Perfect. And that's really, honestly, that's our competitive advantage if we can marry the both together.
Then how do you create that kind of like appetite or desire to be more creative?
Yeah, I mean, one way is to just really sort of in your daily practices, right? How do you sort of demand for more, for higher standards of thinking or higher standards of creativity or higher standards of innovation, right? Again, I'm not talking about the innovation of technology. I'm talking about just innovation in daily business work. Technology is different. I mean, obviously there are many ways to do it. But, one of the goals, for example, that we have, just even in simple things like planning, for example, when we create a plan for the organization, the one filter that, we would have would be, it's not just a plan about communicating what we do, but is this a plan where our employees, as the first litmus test, will sit up and go, wow, that's exciting. That's exactly where the business should be going. That's exactly where the brand should be going. If we don't sort of get a reaction, we know that, okay, it's a nice idea, it's a nice plan, maybe we'll get the results, but it's mundane, it's mediocre. Our goal is always, let's push ourselves even more. How do we get a more exciting, idea? How do we generate more energy and enthusiasm from the organization? Because that leads eventually to better execution and to belief and, passion as well, right? In all our marketing ideas and advertising ideas, we don't accept the first round that comes to us. We say, this is, it's very mediocre. It's very much what everybody else would do. Why can't we find, a better way to, represent, some of these things? So some of those excellence comes from ideas, but there are other forms of excellence that you talked about that comes from execution as well.
Yeah.
Standards, right? So, for example, you mentioned like in McDonald's, we were the first ones to really sort of bring to scale this whole kiosk ordering idea where you go to the restaurants and do your kiosk ordering, and it's become very robust. For example, we are not the leading edge innovators where we would, have the best, the latest technology, etc. But we're the kind of brand where we think that our innovation is that we can bring the whole population along with us. So we create robust technology, maybe not the sexiest, but technology that works, simple technology, and we can then, channel and bring, the population to use our technology so that they over time get easily converted, right? And now, 100% of the transactions go through these kiosks or through the app, and it's all cashless right now.
Yeah.
So that's a big change from the old days where, you have our crew and our aunties standing behind the POS registers and taking orders and those sorts of things, right? So in that sense also, the innovation come in various ways. Execution in innovation, Even in all the things we do in drive-thrus, you don't see it, but there's a lot of innovation technology there. Our kitchens are all really technology enabled, for example. Yeah.
What's one of those projects that when you look back on, you were particularly proud of in terms of championing creativity or bringing about the innovation?
I think two things. One was delivery in Singapore. We started delivery in 2003, when nobody else was doing it.
Yeah.
And,
No smartphones.
no smartphones.
Everyone's
It was,
calling.
call line, and nobody at McDonald's was doing it really. Maybe Middle East, there were a couple of people who were doing it, right? And we got very slapped on the wrist for it, even though we sort of communicated and brought stakeholders along. But there were a lot of dissenting voices about McDonald's doesn't do delivery. We're not that brand, right? But when we did it, we got double-digit sales increases, which lasted for 14 years on delivery. Never stopped because we could never meet the demand. That showed how much consumer demand there was for this, and it proved itself out when all the third-party delivery vendors started coming on, like your Grabs and your Food Pandas, etc. Right? So the market clearly was there, right? But again, that was sort of a small innovation that had dramatic results throughout the organization because it helped us to transfer this innovation to other parts of Asia and then eventually to the West. So I call it sort of a reverse boomerang, right? Why does all innovation have to come from the West to the East? Why can't we sort of reverse that spin, right? And let some innovation here move from East to West, right? And now you've seen a lot of innovation coming from our China businesses and other parts of Asia as well.
Yeah. So you got McDelivery. What's the second one that you were proud of yourself personally?
I thought the whole transformation of our digital in our restaurants was, you see it now. You see it now, and it's all done, and it's up and running. And it's like life as per normal. But at the time of transition, number one, we had to, change our whole operating model, right? And apart from bringing our people along, which was a big struggle in itself, and to manage that change management, right? That period of change management, we had to sort of, deal with putting all these kiosks into our restaurants, getting rid of all our POS registers. Sometimes our software wasn't perfect, but it was more about progress versus perfection to move faster, right? And then teaching our consumers and getting the trust for them to use these, kiosks in the restaurants. And then how do we then deploy our crew? We made them into guest experience leaders versus standing at the counter, so they can spend more time with the customers and be more hospitable and work with families. So that whole process, deploying the hardware and also sort of reshaping some of our work for more hardware for our crew. That process took us 3 years, and we did it in quick time. But we sort of did that really quickly so that the pain, we did it faster, that the pain sort of went away faster, and we got most of consumers comfortable with that. And I thought that was an interesting one because being a small market, we can control it. We then could show these results to all the other markets within McDonald's. That's possible, right? Full scale, we've done it, it's done. And it's also good national service for us within Singapore to show that, consumers will eventually come along and learn how to, accept, transacting with technology, right? So that was quite fulfilling, I would say.
There's a good thing about Singapore as well, that you can act as a pilot or test bed.
Absolutely.
For bigger markets to possibly embrace experimentation.
Exactly. We have all the infrastructure here to enable all that. Yeah.
There's a downside to risk, to embracing risk and innovation, which is that you will fail. And I'm sure you have to experience your fair share of failures as well. And I wanted to hear from you, how do you navigate those failures, not only maybe as a leader, but as a person? When you see those setbacks, how do you actually push yourself to move forward?
Yeah, I think the main thing about failures is that being, I don't think anybody at this stage, unless you're a leading edge sort of innovative organization, we do things that probably are quite logical. We do things that are fact based, and we we probably have taken the time to understand where the opportunity was for us to take on some of these interesting projects, right? And again, bring along stakeholders as well. And the stakeholders generally know whether maybe things are going to work, maybe things are not going to work. For example, we are very good at the breakfast and day part business. Our business at night, not so good, right? For dinner, because dinner people generally eat heartier meals than quick service sort of restaurant meals. So, for example, at one point in time, we've always said maybe if we sort of work within Asia and sort of be able to sort of give more hearty, substantial meals like rice and those sort of things, maybe it'll work. Didn't work, right? But we spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of research to try to present something that would work, right? Didn't work. And so how do you deal with that? I mean, everything was well considered. The amount of money we spent was a good learning for us in terms of what not to do. And maybe we should be focusing on, maybe energizing the parts of the business that we already have traction on. And maybe, not try to fight some of these headwinds that we really don't have much play on as well, right? I think that the goal is not to sort of penalize people who were doing it because all of us, were, aware of what was going on. The goal then is to figure out, what did we learn from it? Do we really want to embark on another trial of something in that area? Maybe we can approach it differently. Maybe it's not about product. Maybe it's about convenience. How do we become more convenient during dinner? And so we took a step back and, looked at it from the other angle. Don't change the products, but maybe let's expand our convenience base. And so that led us to other things, which were delivery during dinner, became a big part of our growth. We didn't have to change any product. It led us to things like thinking about maybe night is a bigger opportunity. So we had extended operating hours to 24 hours, right? And we realized that when we extended 24 hours, maybe, between 2 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock, the business ain't so good, right? But suddenly when you extend your hours, your caller hours between 11 when we used to close to suddenly 2 o'clock, that's a huge opportunity for us. Because, last time when at 11, we start closing store at 10 o'clock, the lights go off, etc. But now you extend it, there's a lot of business there, right? So, I think it sort of, as long as you can learn from it, you can pivot to find some other areas of opportunity. So dinner became, delivery and 24-hour operations, right? So we sort of found success in those areas from failure in trying to drive a dinner business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now people, when they think about supper, McDonald's is one of the top names, right?
And the reason why we position, and that becomes now a marketing and a brand idea, that we don't say we're open, between, 7 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning. That's not a good marketing idea. We just say 24 hours. Whenever you feel like it, just come, right? Yeah.
That's so interesting. Now I got to see a little bit about kind of like the genius behind extending to 24 hours. And naturally, I want to bring this conversation to a close. But I wanted to ask you a few questions that I personally wanted to ask as a McDonald's fan, which is that, you've been in charge of McDonald's for quite a while. I'm sure you have a favorite go-to meal. What's a meal that, everyone should try at McDonald's?
My favorite go-to meal is quarter pounder with cheese meal.
Why?
Because I like the beef. I think they found a way to cook it differently now as well. I just like that I just like that hearty, meaty sandwich basically.
And then the other one is that in Singapore, the McFlurry machines work really well. But in other countries, they say the ice cream machines often break down. Is there a conspiracy behind it or what?
No conspiracy. I think they have some issues with, I don't want to talk for McDonald's, but they have some issues with the vendors and who can actually fix the machines.
Oh, I see.
Right. So for us, obviously, we have our people on standby. The machines, it's a very variable real estate. One machine can generate a lot of business, right? And over time, again, innovation. Now we have technology that can heat treat the machines. In the old days, we need to dismantle machines every day. It's a real tedious process. It's like science fiction. You got how to put everything back together, etc. But in today's world, we found the technology not to be able to do that, while at the same time making sure that all the product is well maintained and clean and efficient and those sorts of things, right?
Yeah. What's the origin story of McSpicy in Singapore?
Interesting. I think I might be getting this wrong, but in the McDonald's world, people think McSpicy started from Hong Kong or China. But the reality, and I know this because I was here, it started in Singapore. It started with 2 thin patties of McSpicy, at that point when we were sort of trying to find a fighter product versus honestly KFC Zinger Burger at that time, right? That eventually evolved to a full, thigh meat patty, and that's become the number one sandwich in Singapore. And the spicy idea has translated now everywhere around the world. It's become a big hit also in the US, etc. Not the same spice level as Asia, of course, but yeah.
So you could say that McSpicy might be a Singaporean export.
It was a Singapore idea.
That's fantastic. And then the last question I have for you would be, if you were to give advice to someone starting out in their career today, in whatever industry, what's the kind of advice or the pep talk you would give to them?
Yeah, I would say that, I think in today's world, the opportunities are far and few. So anytime that you think you have the opportunity to, get a varied range of experiences, I would put up my hand very quickly. Because the earlier in your starting career that you sort of, get through these checklists of experiences, the, stronger your foundation becomes, and you're then able to, move on to bigger and better things. So that's one, right? The second one would be more of a, back to this idea about, where are your standards? How do you hold your standards high no matter what you do? And how do you make sure that you're not, falling into any form of mediocrity? Because at the end of the day, you have to create sort of a leadership brand or leadership voice that's pertinent to you, right? And are you going to be the 9 out of 10 normal person? Or are you going to be that one, standout person with a slightly different take on things, a slightly different voice, a slightly different brand, right? That adds value to the conversation versus, adds just noise to the conversation again, right? So I would push ourselves to do that. And you have to push yourself all the time to do that. You may not achieve that at every meeting or every initiative, every project, but push yourself to do that. Yeah, that's very important. And the last thing I'd say is that, because people is always critical to any part of any business, the way you sort of approach people and see them is very important. So be very firm in what needs to be done with regards to the business, but be very fair. And at the end of the day, it's really about gaining trust and empathy with people, right? And I know the kind of leaders that make me feel good when I interact with them. I want to do even more for them, right? And I know those leaders that make me feel bad, and I really am not motivated to, be working with them. And it falls back to this, quote that this American poet Maya Angelou used to say. She says, "People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel," right? And, a leader's influence hopefully can make people feel good, motivated, energized, to do more than they thought they could do.
With that, thank you, Kenneth, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
If you enjoyed this episode, click on the video that's appearing on the screen right now.